Okay, everybody, we're ready for part 3. Now we're going to talk about the solution because, you know, I don't like to leave you hanging. And there are some things we can do to help us with our neurology, okay? So let's go back to where we left off. Let me go back to share and let's take a look. Okay. Oops, here we go. Biology is not destiny. Experts tell us that biology and childhood trauma, in fact, are not destiny. We can reboot our brains, we can regain muscle tone, we can recover function in the interconnected areas of our brain. The brain and body are never static. They're always in the process of becoming and changing. Researcher S. Kramer defines neuroplasticity as the ability of the nervous system to respond to the intrinsic or extrinsic stimuli by reorganizing its structure, function, and connection. So by repeatedly activating specific areas of the brain, we can strengthen those areas. Even if we've been set on high reactive mode for decades or lifetime, we can still dial it down. We can respond to life's inevitable stressors more appropriately and shift away from an overactive inflammatory response. We can become neurobiologically resilient. We can develop what's called the resilient wobble. Resilient people have what psychologists call wobble, the ability to waver under the weight of life suffering and trauma, but not fall down like a weeble. Allostasis is what psychiatrists refer to as the amount of trauma we experience over the course of our lives and the cumulative effect of that trauma, how much wear and tear it takes on our body and our brain and our mind. In fact, Bruce McEwen calls it our allostatic load. It's derived from allostasis, the ability to adapt over time to the stressful emotional and physical trials we encounter, return back to equilibrium, and regain our sense of well-being. So we wobble, we recover, and we get on living our lives. In fact, there's even research on the upside of adversity. Mark Seary has been searching for the upside of adversity and asking whether some stress exposure might actually help us be stronger over the long term. Seary had hundreds of patients who suffered from chronic and debilitating back pain, and he had them complete a survey of their lifetime exposure to 37 different types of stressful situations. Patients who had experienced absolutely no prior adversity in their childhood fared just as poorly as those who experienced high levels of adversity, he said. In other words, those participants who had a score of 0 on all childhood adversity questions, including even the mild stressors Seary had included, were just as likely to be deeply disabled by their anxiety and depression and their back pain as were people who had experienced significant levels of adversity when they were young. On the other hand, patients who had met up with some adversity when they were young, but not too much, were least likely to be disabled due to back pain later in life or seek later treatment for anxiety or depression. Experiencing, he says, the right dose of hardship as a child or teenager helped build coping skills, resilience, the perspective to meet the challenge of dealing with debilitating and chronic pain in one's adult life. He also did the ice bucket test. He asked respondents to hold their hands in a bucket of very cold water for 5 minutes. Those who reported a moderate number of negative life events showed less response to physical pain. Seary also had them take a high stakes test in the lab, and the same group was less likely to have a high stress response to the testing. So having faced moderate stress in the past seemed to help individuals cope with newly occurring stressors happening in the here and now. They seem to have gained a sense that when bad things happen, it doesn't mean it's always going to be that bad. He says we're not talking about the need to eliminate stress. In children's lives, learning to deal with normative stress is part of healthy development. Normative stress helps kids learn to seek out resourceful strategies, self-soothe, recover, and build the biological capacity for resilience. It kind of echoes what Robert Sapolsky was saying in our stress movie, when he talked about the issue is not getting rid of stress, it's the type of stress, right? That small doses of controlled stress actually are exciting. Things like, being on a roller coaster, right? So it's not that you never want to be stressed. What causes difficulty, particularly for children, is when they're out of control and the stressors are unpredictable. In fact, toxic stress occurs when a child's stress response system is activated in the absence of supportive, calming relationships, and then stay activated for a prolonged period of time. And that's basically what life is like for the child. This is not the stress associated with having a bad day. Okay, this is the stress associated with chronic activation of systems that disrupt our brain circuits as they're developing and begin to wear us down. So we can build our resilience. So there's a variety of formal definitions of resilience, all of which focus on our capacity to bounce back from or even grow in the face of adverse circumstances. Rather than a set of characteristics, I would propose that resilience is a quality and seeds are there even when we feel most broken or injured. And so this is a strength-based perspective. I would acknowledge the scar tissue from trauma and early attachment disruption and see the places where we continue to function well, maybe even excel. Our potential resilience can be developed and impacted by nature, the quality and amount of attachment relationships, the availability of other resources for interpersonal support, temperament, the capacity to regulate our emotions, and prior experience of trauma. Because our potential to access our resilience is impacted by the internal and external resources we have available to us, we do not have to necessarily shift the stressors in our life. In fact, that may not even be possible. But we can increase our interpersonal resources and even support our neurology to operate at our best in the face of these challenges. We can create new neurons, make new synaptic connections, promote new patterns of thoughts and reactions, bring underconnected areas of the brain back online, and reset our stress response so we decrease the inflammation that makes us ill. We can develop our capacity for connection and attachment. We can address the physical trauma that continues to interrupt our immune system, and we can develop self-care strategies that increase the odds we will thrive in our addiction counseling careers. So here's where we'll start. The importance of emotional expression. And this is a good question, particularly those of you who are more on the avoidant side. Why should I share what I'm feeling? What's the point? Okay. Kennedy, Moore, and Watson, emotional theorists, suggest there's at least 3 ways where emotional expression can ease our distress. It can reduce distress about distress, meaning doing it and surviving it reduces our fears. So expressing my emotional distress, sharing what's happening with me, and not getting flooded and overwhelmed, okay, being able to manage it, being able to receive the support, helps me feel braver about doing it in the future. Emotional expression also facilitates insight. So vague feelings become clear, deepening self-knowledge, and opens up more possibilities on how to respond because I'm not using all of my energy to cope by myself. And then it can enhance interpersonal relationships. Emotional expression helps us with our communication, helps us feel connected to people, and it signifies to others our state and associated need, right? Distress and the need for comfort or help, or maybe I feel angry, so I need a boundary. And this releases interpersonal resources that helps us develop our adaptive strategies, right? So remember, if we go all the way back to that early stress response, being seen and heard is incredibly important to helping our developed sense of internal awareness of ourself and our awareness of the internal reality of others. Validi and Anda also encourage a conversation between health providers and a client to allow emotional recognition of how we've been impacted by the ACEs in our life. Maybe even having just a conversation about the fact they exist. How old were you at the time of the event? How likely are there events I don't remember? What was my relationship to the person involved in the adversity I faced? Or how much support did you receive from caregivers in your life? Just a conversation about the fact that ACEs matter in your current health has enormous beneficial output. Asking, including about subjects we've been taught as children nice people don't discuss, listening, and accepting the person for who they are and all of their human complexity are a powerful form of doing that confers great relief to patients. It is doing something to bear witness and hear and accurately respond, okay, from a compassionate place. You are doing something, okay? You're not just listening to a ball game. What you're hearing is both their content and how they feel about content, which helps them, which mirrors to the person that their internal reality matters. A lot of us didn't get that growing up. We didn't get that our insides matter. Now, the other strategy that a lot of people have been using is mindfulness, and mindfulness actually does repair the brain. Brain scans of people who face childhood adversity often, again, show a loss of interconnectivity in areas that are critical in creating loving relationships and activating a sense of calm in the face of stress, and even downshifting our inflammatory responses. So when these connections are underdeveloped, we don't have little awareness of our own feelings, and then lack of consciousness about the effects of our behavior on other people. So we're not aware of how other people are seeing and responding to us. So we can't see how our defensive patterns of interacting are hurting those we care for, and we can't see how they are hurting us. So we don't have the insight we need to improve our relationships. Mindfulness meditation helps us change our brain and bring the brain back online and again reset that inflammation response. Research shows that even though mindfulness practitioners still pumped out inflammatory hormones like cortisol when stressed, their cortisol levels went down more quickly once the stressor had passed. Faster cortisol recovery means you rebound more quickly from stressful situations. And again, what you're doing is you're strengthening that parasympathetic neural pathway, right? A parasympathetic response that allows you to rest and recover. It means you're reducing the time your body and mind are bathed in inflammation chemicals. So this leads to less physical and neural inflammation, less disease, anxiety, and depression. Now, when kids practice mindfulness, they may strengthen the same circuits of the brain weakened by early adversity and childhood trauma, including their frontal lobe and hippocampus. Again, the parasympathetic system. So, you focus on your breath, note and name your thoughts, let them go, and see what are not your thoughts. You free yourself from worrying, spinning stories, and ruminating. When you breathe deeply and bring oxygen into your lungs, that oxygen travels throughout the body, into your cells, where it supports all of our life-giving biological pathways. So as you breathe in and out with long, slow breaths through mindfulness breathing, you also strengthen and recharge the activity of that underactive parasympathetic nervous system. We don't have a medicine that boosts the parasympathetic system to rest and recuperate the way mindfulness does. Isn't that funny? Now, there's all kinds of videos, by the way, all kinds of classes you can take on mindfulness. Fortunately, it's in right now, okay? But there is a biological and psychological helpfulness to this that may be worth exploring for you. Now, there's another type of psychotherapy called mind sight. According to Dan Siegel, those of us who face adversity develop what he calls mind sight, the ability to truly see and know the mind. When you focus your attention on the mind, how it's working, it's possible to build specific circuits repair our neurocircuitry, and grow connections among neurons in the same areas of the brain that tend to be weakened due to early adversity, trauma, and insecure attachment. So the first aspect of mind sight is insight, the ability to sense your own internal mental life and reflect inwardly, what you might think of as being self-aware or self-knowing. The second is empathy, the ability to sense the inner mental life of another person and know who that person is. The third is integration, the ability to link those two awarenesses and other processes into an interconnected picture, which gives you, again, more resources to develop your internal reality, right, your inner knowing, and your capacity to respond to people more effectively. It helps you approach problems reflectively and interact with others in a wise and healthy way. It promotes compassionate connections and communication and helps you reconnect your past, present, and future in coherent ways so your life story begins to make sense of who you are. The problem with constant chronic stress, okay, because of our reactivity, it's like our whole life story is like a series of jarring and disconnected events, right? So the idea is to be able to reclaim your history, reclaim your life, right, in a more organized story that makes sense of who you are. Siegel explains mind sight enables us to go beyond being sad, being angry, and recognize we have the feelings of sadness or anger, see what they are, but they're not the totality of who we are. Accept them for what they are and allow them to transform so we don't get stuck in depression or rage. When you're aware of what you're feeling, when you're in tune with your inner world, you recognize you're getting primed to react. You notice your heart rate's going up. Your breathing is shallow. Your muscles are tense. So you pause, you take a deep breath, take a break, let yourself calm down. Tuning into your own thoughts and those of others links different aspects of the brain and body that help your capacity to be attuned to the world around you in a new way, says Siegel. And this allows for both personal well-being and healthier relationships. When you examine feelings and thoughts, these mental activities create energy in the brain, ions flowing in and out of the membrane of your brain's basic cells. Our neurons leads to the release of chemicals that allow these neurons to communicate with one another, says Siegel. That electrochemical energy helps to reconnect areas of the brain that are less connected due to early adversity, stimulating the growth of neurons and strengthening the brain. Now, there is another approach we could consider called compassion training. And compassion training requires you to actively work with your emotions and assumptions about yourself and others in order to release long-held resentments, hostility, and indifference. It helps you nurture compassion, understanding, and a sense of connection with others to develop a deep feeling of affection for yourself. It allows you, perhaps for the first time, to be on your own side, be on your own team. So you begin by focusing on your breath, and you hold an image of yourself in your mind and begin to wish yourself well. You say these set of phrases out loud. May I be filled with love and kindness. May I be safe and protected. May I love and be loved. May I be happy and contented. May I be healthy and strong. May my life unfold with ease. Move your focus to someone you love dearly and hold that person in your mind's eye and repeat above. Next, bring to mind someone you don't know well, like the post officer or a person who cuts your hair, and repeat those same phrases. Now bring into your mind's eye someone whom you've had a relational difficulty or discord, not somebody who's caused you trauma, but pain, and repeat those phrases. And finally, extend your feelings of loving kindness to include all beings and repeat those phrases. It's a daily practice. Okay, now turn your attention to your body. Mending the body through the gut Recent science shows that there's a sophisticated neural network transmitting messages from trillions of digestive bacteria to the brain that exerts a powerful influence on our state of mind, creates a feedback loop between the brain and the gut that goes both ways. Emotional adversity, mental stress, and trauma lead to a greater proliferation of bad bacteria in the gut, and bad bugs in the gut lead to lower mood, anxiety, depression, and a proclivity for being less resilient in the face of adversity and stress. Now, why? First, gut bacteria manufactures more than 80% of the body's supply of serotonin, which significantly influences mood. And remember that the neurotransmitter serotonin is connected to depression, our sleep cycle, right? Our eating. It's a very important neurotransmitter. It allows us to feel satiated, satisfied. Secondly, good gut microbiotics, like those found in probiotics, have a direct effect on neurotransmitter receptors in the brain, like GABA. Now, the neurotransmitter GABA, again, is connected to anxiety management. Okay, it helps us with calm. The messages between the gut and the brain are transmitted via the vagus nerve. We talked about that before. We were talking about this idea of fight or flight and dissociation. This is the primary mediator of the inflammatory stress response. And that's why scientists have started to refer to our gut as our second brain. The gut microbiome heavily influences neural development, brain chemistry, emotional behavior, pain perception, learning, and memory. So improving our diet and reducing our intake of processed foods and sugar and adding greens, fruits, and fermented food rich in probiotics can play a critical role in healing the gut. Because microorganisms in our gut control our brain, we need to do whatever we can to make this microbiome healthy and give the pathway in our brain all the serotonin and nutrients it needs to send out the correct messages along our brain synapses. Okay, and finally, let's talk about connecting, right? And this is the one that all the avoidant codependents are like, oh, I don't want to. I know. But when you begin to feel trust, perhaps for the first time in your life, and when this process is repeated, you modify old circuits in the brain that tell you what you cannot trust. You create new brain cells and a connection that allow you to create new habits and responses to other people. Part of the power of therapy and solid relationships is you can learn finally as an adult to become attached to a safe person. Here we go. People can be part of the solution. In fact, okay, what we've learned throughout all three parts of this is being seen and heard requires another person, and we need other people to regulate our neural system. We can't do everything ourselves. I know the avoidants all want to read a book. It doesn't go like that, okay? You're going to need to invite, in recovery, we say a support system is 3 people in your world that you can establish this kind of connection with. All right, I'm going to end it here. I'm not going to explore SE with you because that's a particular type of therapy and we don't need to review that here. Anyway, that concludes our series. More excitedly, I still don't look like a skunk yet, but the longer this coronavirus goes, the more skunk-like this might get. Though I did have some good news I'll have to share with you, that my stylist might be sending out touch-up kits, and I'm very excited about that. Anyway, thank you for listening. Take care.